we will avoid having to send money back to the federal government. So it was really more of a strategic direction from the board about how to, let's go ahead and allocate the dollars to the projects. We'll go through the compliance piece because we had to do it anyway because we were over those thresholds. And then the revenue loss we'll leave out there to make sure that we can capture at the very end of the process.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's a little different because the city didn't have that same issue around the spend piece of it. So, yeah.
Thank you.
For my last piece, just to let you know, I have been out in the field to visit the organizations. I have visited about 14. So the ones that have invoiced, I have gone out to visit with them to see exactly what they do, learn a little bit about their organization, take a tour. So I have several more that I have to attend. And the ones that are not invoicing at this moment, because we need the money spent by 2024, I will be doing a quick little pop-up just to see where we're at, where we're standing, and what's going on, so they can get their money moving. So that will happen in the next couple of months. Thank you. Oh,
I'm sorry,
I'm sorry.
Chair Martin, if I may.
Sure.
One question I have is, do we know why it looks like a couple of the organizations withdrew? Was it just some kind of preference, or was there some kind of?
Yes, so it was not by fault of county. It was all based off of their own reasoning. Okay. Some of the reason was they just didn't have the systems in place to handle a federal grant as such. The board decided to take a different direction in regards to the grant, and I had one just said they decided to move in another direction.
Okay. The second question I have is, are these categories prescribed by the federal government or local standard?
So these categories, the sub-initiative categories, were created by staff, and that helped us come up with the recommendation groups so we can make the recommendations based off of the experts in that sub-initiative.
Yeah, because I think the categorical kind of strategy is convenient, it's efficient, it's a great way to kind of disaggregate data, but I just wonder, when I look at the categories, I think some of them, if I knew more, I probably wouldn't be asking the question. Gotcha. Probably more than likely.
Let me say one thing about that. Essentially, we have one set of criteria to meet for the ARPA grants. We sent that out and in other words, this is nothing but categorizing the grants we received. We created the categories, but the categories were created by the grants we received. So we didn't create the categories at the beginning. We're going to fund $10 million worth of educational attainment grants. We're just going to, we ended up getting $10 million worth of requests that happened to fall into a broad category of education grants. So there was no prescription. It was wide open as long as you meet the federal guidelines, period.
Okay. So essentially the grants kind of guided the construction of categories. Okay,
yes.
Exactly.
I get that. And then the last question I have, do we have some kind of, observation tool or some way to kind of account for the money that has been given out and whether that group has, pound for pound met the commitment or?
Yeah. That would be me. That's my site visits. That's when I go out to visit and monitor to make sure the money is being allocated appropriately, the expenditures are being spent in an appropriate manner. I oversee all of the invoices that come in. Aisha and I kind of share right now because of round two. It's just been, I've been doing all of the invoicing to make sure their documentation is accurate for the submission of their reimbursements. So yes, it's definitely monitored. It's for every cent I keep up with for these subrecipients.
So go ahead.
I want to add on to that. So in the actual agreements, we put the deliverables. The measures and outcomes are listed in the agreement, as well as the amount of funds used and how much it will be used for each amount. So let's just say personnel, $100,000 for personnel. We broke it out by how much money they put for each cost item, for each expense category. And she's going to measure that.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, you're going to measure. She's going to be reviewing that. They're going to submit all of that information in Neighborly, which is our software that we're using to monitor everything. And they're going to submit where they are monthly. So they're going to provide monthly reporting on the deliverables that they put in their agreement.
And there's a comparison between the financial software and the Neighborly grant software. So we make sure we don't miss anything.
So is there something that kind of gives you output data around, let's just say, for example, or I don't want to call out any organization, so let's just say organization XYZ, on a scale of 1 to 3, they're at a 2 as it relates to what they submitted as what they would be doing because of the impact of COVID.
So are you talking about their performance of, say that if they're submitting, they have a report that also the organization has to submit on a monthly basis for their performance. So I look at those performance reports and I analyze to make sure they're on point to what they have submitted for their measurables. And that helps me allocate to make sure the money will be spent properly and make it to 2024. Or if we're looking at that they're not spending enough money for, or they're spending too much money, that's when it throws the flag for me to go out and say, okay, so look, we have to go back and we need to reallocate funds, or we need to look to see whether or not are you going to make it to 2024 to be able to spend that money. So yes, every part is looked at and analyzed. So yes, we do keep up with their performance and how they are actually making sure the services are provided to the community.
Yeah, I think that,
I just want to add on that comment. In one sense, you have various processes that you pay for with the grant that you believe will produce an outcome. So, and I'm thinking particularly of I'm very familiar with the pre-K grant because it was really kind of put together during the year's worth of study. So there's a belief that the processes that will get paid for will produce these outcomes for students and for teachers and for parents, and there are ways to assess it. So some of their material will be evaluated on an annual basis, but on a monthly basis, you know that you're spending dollars to implement the processes you said would make a difference in the long term. So in some cases, they're process outcomes, and in other cases, they're real outcomes of what you're trying to do. You're doing the things that you said you would do to get the desired thing.
and I think that's a great point, Dr. Martin, because you have, the monthly report out based on you're spending the money, you're doing, we can hold you financially, accountable. And I think the citizens want to know that. I also think citizens want to know, to be fair to any group, it may take a year to see if what we intended, we see good outcomes around, the dollars. And so I know that, we may not be at that point yet, but I think that once we get to that, at least end of year, we can report out to the community, what were the, outcomes based on what the intentions were behind the dollars given to some of these organizations.
That also is a part of that federal report. It's not listed on that quarterly report that you receive, but the information that I put into that federal portal also asks for a certain amount of clients that's being served. So I too have to report what they send as their performances for clients or services that they are providing. I too have to report that information to the federal government. So it shows that there is progress being made to the federal government and also for us to keep up with. So yeah, I do. By the end of the year, I should have some very good statistics to show that this was implemented and this is the result.
Thank you.
And just to be transparent with the public, this is our last slide here. If you want to visit the ARPA Forsyth County webpage, that's where you can find relevant information in regards to ARPA. Also, we've been working with Forsyth County's Community Communications Department, led by Ed McNeil, to shine a light on the county's efforts to use ARPA dollars in the community. And they'll be producing videos highlighting each organization. So the first one was released Monday, January 30th, and it was Whole Man Ministries. And I have the link here, share that. And then they're going to launch videos every other week and continue through fall 2023.
And we do have one subrecipient that has completely finished their project. So that was also Whole Man Ministries. They did a very good job. They were very successful.
If I may, Chairman, yes, thank you for sharing with us about the Whole Man Ministries. We talked about them during our town hall. And is this the video link?
I believe so, yeah.
How many minutes is that video? We got 5 minutes.
If you say you have 5 minutes, you have 5
Let's
minutes.
do that. It's a really good feel good. So thank you.
Let me see if I can open it. I don't. Ashley, can you do it? You take over.
Sorry, I didn't mean to make it so complicated, but it's
No, it's fine.
Do you have any other questions while we're waiting on the video? Thank you.
Got it. Thank you both.
Thank you.
There you go. Probably at the bottom one. Oh, no.
Dr. Martin, just a quick question as they're setting up. Is there a way for us to get the organizations that applied but they were not approved? Is there?
I think, Aisha, do we have the old grant applications that were that were not improved, that are not approved?
I believe the list is still on the Forsyth County website, on the ARPA webpage.
Okay.
The list of every one from round one.
And we actually have the applications probably.
I do have all the applications,
You
though.
can't click on the website, you can't click on the application, can you?
Yeah,
Oh,
no, you can,
So
you cannot, you cannot click on the application, but if you want one in particular, I could share with you the applications.
Really, I would just want the list of the ones that were not approved, and then
Gotcha.
based on that list, I would just,
I can provide
go
that.
and get. Thank you.
Whole Man Ministries renovated this home and made it available for homeless veterans. That work is getting some help from Forsyth County soon. I'll tell you more about it in just a moment. The American Rescue Plan Act was signed into law in March of 2021, providing $350 billion to federal, state, and local governments to meet pandemic response needs and to rebuild stronger. Forsyth County received $74 million. Aisha Carter is the county's American Rescue Plan Act administrator.
The County Commission directed staff to create a public application process for Forsyth County nonprofits and internal government departments to be considered for funding. Forsyth County held 2 ARPA application processes. $27 million was awarded in the first round across the following sub-initiatives: affordable housing, arts and tourism, behavioral health support, education attainment, food and nutrition, health and wellness, gun and gang violence prevention, public health, rental utility and financial assistance, sewer, water, small business support, workforce development, local government, premium pay, and revenue loss.
In this video series, we'll highlight the agencies to show where the commissioners have made investments in the community.
I'm Pastor Washington, and my wife here is Pastor Camilla Washington. We are fortunate to be part of Whole Man Ministries. We are a grassroots organization, boots on the ground.
and we truly believe in giving back to the community. One of the things that we do, and it's a passion of ours, is giving back to the homeless veterans. And what we do is we look for dilapidated homes, and we bring those, we bring them up from the bottom to the top. We go in, we take everything out, we gut the house completely, and bring it up to a nice home where a veteran can go in. And you know, when I think about veterans, they've done so much for our country, and this is just a little way that we can give back to them, and just get them sourced back into the community with some of them with their families, and some just single men and women. But it is really a blessing of ours to be able to do this. The other thing that we do, we believe in giving back to the entire community with food drives. And when the pandemic first hit in 2020 and everything was locked down, we opened up our campus and we fed thousands of families. And there were many men and women from different socioeconomic backgrounds that we gave to.
We applied for the ARPA grant, and fortunately we were selected. We were grateful for that. The amount was $35,000. We used the money to go in and renovate a dilapidated home that a homeless veteran will receive. We were fortunate, and we want to thank the commissioners for selecting us.
And I believe that when the Forsyth County Commissioners awarded us and afforded us this grant, they actually were putting a brick in the foundation of each and every one of the homes that we work on. I think that when you take a veteran, a homeless veteran off the streets of Winston-Salem and give them a home, you're saying, we love you as citizens of this city. Not only just the organization, but Forsyth County Commissioners saying we care. And we care about our veterans that have given so much to the country. And then they're also putting a brick in the foundation, and they're making that house a home for each and every veteran.
Forsyth County Commissioners prioritized approving applications for organizations located in or operating in qualified census tracts, or QCTs. These areas are defined as having 50% or more of households below 60% of area median income, or where the poverty rate is 25% or higher. Of the $74 million, county leadership applied $25.8 million to revenue loss, administrative costs, and premium pay for employees. In round one, they invested $20.4 million in QCTs, and in round two, another $19.5 million went to organizations working in or located in QCTs. Combined, the county invested $40 million, or 53% of its ARPA money, in QCTs.
The grants going to the nonprofits come with strict guidelines on how the money is to be accounted for.
Well, first, when they started off with phase one, we implemented a neighborly software for the recipients to submit their invoices to the county. That helps track the expenditures, also for their reporting, to monthly reporting for me to do the quarterly federal report. We also implemented 2 trainings for the subrecipients to allow them to ask questions, to show them how to submit their invoices, and to explain to them what their expenditures, how they can spend their money, and what categories that would fall into.
Visit our YouTube and Vimeo pages to learn more about how Forsyth County used their monies from the American Rescue Plan Act. For Forsyth County, I'm Ed McNeil.
Great. Very good.
And the community works, right?
All righty, Mr. Chairman, do you want to go ahead and dive into agenda?
Yes.
All right, very good. So we're going to present, kind of review the items for February 16th formal meeting, and so we'll go ahead and dive into that. First item are minutes for the meeting of February 2nd, so obviously those are...
They will go out tomorrow.
Out tomorrow. Very good. I've got 3 budget and finance items. 2 of them are Kyle Wolf, so he's going to come up. He'll review adoption of the 2022 county capital projects, 2/3 bond capital project ordinance, and then associated ordinances and setting that up. So sure. Turn it over to Kyle.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. And so every couple of years, the board adopts 3 capital maintenance, capital project ordinances. These are for life cycle maintenance projects such as roofs, HVAC systems, paving, boilers, flooring, things like that. They're primarily funded through the issuance of 2/3 general obligation bonds. And so the first one is the CPO for the county, which will be $2 million for county facilities and $2 million for parks. The second one is for the school system, which is $10,235,000, which is funded with $8.5 million of two-thirds bonds, and then a transfer from the general fund of $1.735 million that was included in the FY23 adopted budget. And then the third is for Forsyth Tech, which is $2.3 million of two-thirds general obligation bonds. Again, for these life cycle maintenance projects. And be happy to try and answer any questions you all have.
Questions?
Yeah, that is the normal two-thirds bonds. We are going to have some discussions at the winter work session about debt strategy and all that, but we needed to go ahead and get this one done just so we can get this started. The third item is also, Kyle's, it's an amendment to the 2016 Forsyth Technical Community College Capital Projects Ordinance to align project cost.
Right. And so back in 2016, when we had the bond referendum, we set up a CPO for Forsyth Tech's projects for the $65 million that were approved for their 4 projects, which were renovations at the Oak Grove campus, the Aviation Center, the Learning Commons, and the Transportation Center. Dr. Spriggs talked about it a little bit today. Some of the funds have been in a budget reserve, and they just need to be allocated to these projects so that and also costs need to be aligned due to the overage and the Transportation Center costs that Dr. Spriggs mentioned today. And so this is really just moving those funds, making them available to be spent. Any questions?
Question for Kyle.
All right. Item 4 is also a budget matter, and Christopher Ong in Budget Management is going to come up and review an amendment to the 2022 PAYGO Capital Projects Ordinance. You've got an associated amendment to the fiscal year 2023 budget to accept a transfer. So,
thank you, Mr. Manager, members of the board. Good afternoon. So this is sort of a two-step process here. At the December 1st meeting, 2022, the board adopted the ordinance to establish the 2022 PAYGO Capital Projects Ordinance. Among those projects is a EAP project, security cameras at the recycling convenience centers. So following that protocol, the first action that will be asked of you all is to formally approve this project. So the first item, item A, will transfer the project budget from the capital project ordinance to the general operating budget ordinance due to the low total projected cost of the project. And the second amendment accepts the transfer and appropriates the project cost into EAP's operating budget. Any questions?
if you remember, it was security cameras. It was a fairly small item, security cameras at those recycling centers. And minors here, if you had any questions about that, probably not. But
are they installed already? Oh, they're just coming up. Just transferring the money tonight. Got it. I'll be interested to see what you find out from some of the security issues here.
All right. Very good. All right. Thank you, guys. Appreciate that. Item 5 is also Christopher's, I believe, so don't go anywhere. It is an amendment to the 2020 Motor Vehicles and Mobile Equipment Capital Replacement Capital Projects Ordinance, and then you've got an associated amendment with non-capitalized equipment. So,
okay. Thank you again. Again, this is another two-step item that you'll be asked to consider. So the first item A is going to be an amendment to the 2020 Motor Vehicles and Mobile Equipment Replacement CPO. And so on this one, the first item on this is to appropriate $19,475 in reimbursements that are received from 2 total loss motor vehicle accidents. And then the second purpose of this one is also to transfer $143,283.09 back to the general fund budget, specifically to general services operating budget, and that's for the purchase of non-capitalized equipment that's necessary to upfit emergency vehicles that are presently needed. And if you look on that, that shows the breakdown between those allocations of the emergency vehicle funds.
Those are lights, sirens, all the equipment that goes in all those vehicles. And so we pull it out of that because it's not capitalized, basically.
Questions for Chris?
That's it, if there's any questions.
All right, Christopher,
Thank you.
Appreciate that. Item 6 is Damon Sanders Pratt, our deputy manager, is going to come up, and he is going to present you a resolution to create and staff a new Animal Services Department for Custody and Care Services. It's got some associated parts to it, so I'll turn it over.
Thank you, Mr. Manager, Mr. Chairman, and Commissioners. So after the board's December 15th action, which basically asked the staff to resume animal care and custody services at the Forsyth County Animal Shelter when we weren't able to reach an extension with the Humane Society. This item sets the underpinnings to resume the county taking over services at the animal shelter. So it does several things. It creates the Animal Services Department, which no longer existed, which is really more of a division in search of a department. But
yeah, let's call it a cost center, because it's actually not going to be a department per se. It's going to be in a separate cost center. We're still negotiating, trying to figure out where it fits into the organization in the best place. But anyway.
So it creates this area, this cost center that we can now start purchasing supplies and equipment and paying for employees and starting the training process before the turnover period on April 1st. Additionally, it's a budget ordinance amendment. And so this budget ordinance amendment will actually fund the equivalent of 6 months since we'll start actually hiring people and buying supplies and equipment in February. And for any unanticipated expenses, there are $541,384 of new money. The $122,961 is transfer from the sheriff's office into animal services, which were positions that we transferred from animal services into the sheriff's office when we did the contract for the minimal care and custody that we retained for non-dogs and cats and office work pertaining to that and licensing at the time. So the total is $664,345 this transfer, including $122,961 of new money and $541,384. I'm sorry, I take that back. The $122,961 is a transfer of money from the sheriff's office. $541,384 is new money that we're moving out of the fund balance into this cost center so that we can start buying supplies and equipment and hiring staff. We've already had some discussions with the Humane Society based on some questions from the board last Thursday. We talked about what the transition looks like and moving forward, how we can best work with one another. And so the technology that we're going to use, we were using something called Chameleon, a solution called Chameleon, which kind of stood alone. And so we updated that. It didn't speak to other organizations' equipment that they use to track their animals. Now we're looking towards Shelter Love, which is used by the Humane Society as well as by ARF. And so by using that, although they won't actually have staff in our shelter, when somebody goes to the Humane Society or to ARF, if they're looking at animals, they don't see one that they are particularly interested in adopting or fostering, that those different organizations can actually show them the Shelter Love site that has our animals in real time that we also have. And if somebody's interested in that animal, then they say, well, I can get that from the county animal shelter. So really they can kind of see the animals in our shelter. It almost serves as some of their space as well, only they'd have to come in and get it, and the person could adopt it from or from the Humane Society without having to necessarily come to our shelter. We just transfer it to those facilities. We are looking to basically stand back the number of positions that we drew down when we did the conversion. Now, that includes some temp money. So we had a number of temp care and custody staff. Now, our staff that will be transferring back, who did this previously, they would rather have that temp help be permanent help. So eventually we'll probably be coming back to you to lower the temp number and add employees, actual county employees, to provide the service. From March 30th to April 4th, March 30th will still be under the agreement with the Humane Society, but they're going to close to the public on March 30th. And then when we take over on the 1st, we're going to be closed until the 4th as we do this transition of equipment, of staff, of just everything. And then we'd open back up on the 4th. We did a similar thing when we went into the contract. We were closed for a number of days in order to do that. But in short, this item basically provides funding and kind of the underpinning so that we can get back into resumption of services in care and custody. I'll be glad to answer any questions if you have them.
That's one quick question on the equipment issues, because I'm trying to get at ownership. I'm assuming that there were, in part of the contract with the Humane Society, that they bought equipment that essentially would be considered their equipment. I'm trying to kind of get the difference between, did they buy some equipment that is serving us in our animal shelter? And I'm trying to get, where does this custody of the material, equipment, if you will, go? And could you give me an example of something, for example, that will go with them and that we will buy new?
So they'll be taking straw with them. They'll be taking their squeegee equipment that they use to clean the shelters with them. Some display information that they had on a wall that they put up for their purposes, they'll be taking with them. So we'll be replacing squeegees new. We'll be buying straw new. We'll be buying medicine that they'll be taking their medicine that they have a license for with them. And when we get our own license for the facility, we have to buy our own medicine. So there'll be a number of things like that. The board gave the Humane Society $15,000 to upfit the vet space in the facility, and that was to the Humane Society. So I believe they're going to take that equipment with them as well. So if we were to operate a vet facility or to encourage a vet to come there as an enticement, that question may come up again. Does the board want to outfit that facility? Because we gave, the contract kind of says it's to the Humane Society that equipment was provided, at $15,000, not necessarily to stay at the animal shelter. It was like a special approach to them.
That's kind of a real interesting question, if you ask me. I mean, we were requested to improve the facility so that it could provide more veterinary services. I think one could also make an argument that the intended use of that was to serve vet services for the shelter. Could you argue that, perhaps?
You could, although the grant that the board made was to the Humane Society, and they were, in fact, at our shelter. But they're going to also stand up a vet service at their facility on Country Club. And, the way the resolution read, that the grant was to them for the equipment to use for vet services. So if they use them for vet services at Country Club, they could do that, the way it read. But I hear what you're saying.
Okay, yeah, I hear you, so.
I do want to say I'm pleased to report there's really good cooperation with the Humane Society in the transition. I think every indication there's going to be a lot of cooperation. The mission's still aligned and all that. So, but you want to?
Sure. We they were our main partner kind of before we had the contract. And then, we've had the close relationship since 2018. Afterward, we'll have a similar relationship with some transportation opportunities, which I was talking to the chairman about earlier, where I asked, well, how can we enhance what we used to do? And so they have some arrangements where they can transfer animals outside of the county. And so they will load up a van and take animals to Maryland, Jersey, other places. And they will do that for us as well for a fee, per animal. But there are different ways that we can cooperate, and they said that was one that they'd be willing to do, that we can help empty the shelter in that way.
Well, I'm glad to hear that this is an amicable agreement between the two parties, and I'm just certain that Forsyth County will, as they have in the past, take care of those animals that need care. And we have the facilities, we also have funding, we also have experience in that field. But it's good to know that as we walk away from the agreement that we had, that still doesn't close the door on a fine outfit like our partners, and they're still there if we need them, and vice versa. This is a good way to do it. I'm glad to see us on that track.
Short question, if I may. During the 4-day closure period, will the remote viewing opportunities continue to be available online?
They will, but you won't be able to adopt from the shelter, but you will be able to redeem your animal. So if we seize your animal for some violation and there's a time limit to redeem it, you'd still be able to do that. But for just general traffic in and out the shelter will be closed during the transition.
Sure, but someone wants to look at the animals that are available, they can do that.
You'll be able to do that likely
Online.
through the Humane Society's site, and then when ours comes up, through ours as well.
Okay, so the online option is not available while the shelter is during that a brief closure period.
Right, and you won't be able to adopt at that time, or foster out at that time.
And is the license on track for being in place on April 1?
We're working on the inspections for license for the facility, as well as for our DHHS and DEA drug licenses. We've acquired the services of a doctor that you need to be able to sponsor the drugs at the facility, so we have that. And so the inspector hasn't come yet, but our shelter manager is working with them now on making that happen.
Any other questions?
Chairman, yes, not a question, but just a comment that I have a little bit of heartburn around the resolution that was written. And not only just for this, just moving forward, I'm hopeful that Gordon will be there and upfront when we're writing these resolutions, because I kind of think it's unfair to us, but it's amicable, so we accept it, and I'm grateful for the services that Animal Services have provided us over these years. But yeah, I just wanted to say that about the resolutions in the future. Thank you.
We all read eyes on, so I'm going to own that too, then look at that at the time.
No worries. Thank you.
I may make one just other comment. I apologize for, I was finished, but I think we need to work out whatever methodology we're going to use to track save rate, et cetera, because there's a lot of numbers that were thrown around during that period of time. And I think we need a methodology that everybody understands, particularly the Humane Society, and that we are all kind of what we're going to use to measure the success rate of the shelter itself. Because now the Humane Society is since going to look like they're going to say they're a no-kill shelter for the animals that they get. And I just want to make sure we have the quote-unquote, all these rates, kill rate, euthanasia rate, whatever it is, that we have a clear what the denominator is and all the dividing for rates. Because I think that was a little unclear before, and I think we ought to talk about it before publicly, have them understand it, send it to them in a letter, make things something clear, so that we know why that's going to be reported from this point forward.
I think it is fair to say that there's a community live release rate, not just the county shelter, and then the main other partner in this space is the Humane Society. If we add our animals together in a way to create that larger denominator, right, then the live release rate would be higher because they have 100%, and ours is going to look lower, and it will be, but because we take all comers shelter. We take animals with behavioral issues. We take animals with a variety of challenges that maybe even some people who want to have their animal voluntarily euthanized, they'll bring the animal to us because it's old or it's sick or it's hurt, and we do that for them. But there is a community live release rate, which is probably a better focus than just the county itself.
Good. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Damon. Very good. Agenda item 7 is amendment to the fiscal year 2022-23 budget ordinance that appropriates $121,850 of reserve behavioral health services fund balance for repairs and updates to the Sturmer House property. Denise Price is going to come up and review this item.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. The item before you for consideration is a budget ordinance amendment to appropriate $121,850 of reserve behavioral health services funds for repairs, updates, and assessments of compliance with current building codes to the Sturmer House facility located at 5560 Sturmer Park Circle, in anticipating of establishing at that location a 24-hour residential transitional home for youth in DSS custody. We have become aware that we do have to bring this facility up to current codes. So I do want to say in all transparency, it is possible that we may have to come back and ask for additional funds. as we're currently in a discovery phase of what exactly does that mean. But this does allow us to begin the work that we've identified as being needed and necessary. Be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions?
Thank you.
Thanks, Denise. All right, we have a couple of grant matters specifically related to economic development items. You got item 8 is a resolution accepting funds from and authorizing an agreement with North Carolina Department of Commerce for a water and sewer infrastructure project at Tanglewood Business Park. Kyle Haney.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. As the County Manager said, this item is accepting funds that were appropriated through the North Carolina State budget to support sewer and water projects at Tanglewood Business Park. I know it's been a while since Tanglewood Business Park was in front of this board, so I wanted to provide a brief history and context for that project. And I'm going to put a couple things up here on the Elmo. So Tanglewood Business Park really spurred out of a presentation that was given to the commissioners back in 2015 in a winter work session, showing that there was a need for additional industrial and business sites in the county. The county owned a piece of property that was southeast of Tanglewood Recreational Park. And in 2009, there was a study done internally to decide what the highest and best use of that property was. It was determined that it really was industrial or business property, and that was because there's an adjacent rail line as well as some industrial properties that are to the east of it, and that it was already zoned partially general industrial. So about 2015, the county staff took on the design and planning for using this property for a business park. Along the way, we had the opportunity to partner with the City County Utilities Commission. This property was not served by sewer. However, the City County Utilities Commission and Davie County had a project where Davie County was building a sewer lift station to pump sewage across the Yadkin over this property to the Muddy Creek Basin facility. And we were able to actually put a sewer lift station on the site that would create the potential to serve this site with sewer in the future. So the county funded that with some funds, some loan funds, as well as a grant from the City County Utilities Commission. That was completed in 2020. It is operational. Just to clarify, that gives the potential to serve that site, but there are no outfall lines on that property at this point. And so currently where the project is, there needs to be permanent access to that site. If you can see on this map, I'll actually put up a new map. This is more up to date on what the property looks like right now. So on here, this is where the lift station was built, and then you can see the outline of our property here. This site right here, where you can see some of the clearing in the tree, that's where that permanent access is being built as we speak. It's been graded, or it's been cleared, and some grading's been done. Unfortunately, in the winter, you have to slow down a little bit until the ground warms up, but that will be the stub road that will provide permanent access to the site. So that's ongoing. And so with this funding available, what we would propose doing is working with the City County Utilities Commission to extend a sewer outfall along that property that would allow future connection to that sewer lift station so that it would make it more attractive to businesses. One of the benefits of this sewer lift station is actually that it does provide access to that specific site, but it also opens up opportunities for the surrounding sub-basin. So on this map, you can see the blue area is our property, Tanglewood Business Park. The other shaded areas are also in the sewer basin of the sewer lift station. So there's potential for those sites to also be served by sewer, and they're largely undeveloped at this point. And so we're going to be working with City County Utilities Commission to try to figure out the most efficient way to spend these funds to not only serve Tanglewood Business Park going forward, but also provide the potential for other areas to access sewer as well.
And it'll also potentially make a connection to the current industrial park that's there too, I believe.
That's correct. And there are certainly the industrial sites that are there right now, there are some of those that are on septic that could use access to the sewer. And so it would allow them to connect as well. And so the item accepts that from the state and then also has a budget ordinance amendment attached that would allow us to spend those funds. We would work closely with the City County Utilities Commission.
Your question for Kyle.
Quick question, Mr. Chairman. Is that the same rail line that runs down Stratford Road?
I do believe it connects there. So it is technically active. I will tell you that they don't run, I think they run a rail on there just enough to keep it active, but it's not a lot of rail activity on that side. But I do believe that rail does connect to the Stratford Road.
And farther up along the Idols Road extension, there is a fair amount of rail access that's in that area with industries that are already there.
They're already using it?
Yeah, they are. So if you're coming up Hampton Road and then you take a left if you come up Hampton, there's all those industries when you get to Idols Road extension that are there. A bunch of those have.
Kimmel Park, I believe, is the.
Yeah, they have active rail use. I know because the neighbors call me a lot. So
how do they access that? The line to the east through Winston-Salem has an inoperable trestle, and that's been the main sticking point to any possible use of that as a passenger rail extension from Greensboro. So from where do they come to access the section down there?
We will find out.
I do know, the railroads reached out to us. They were interested in it. I think there's significant improvements that would have to be made for it to become active for industry at some point. So I'm not sure, but we'll give the answer to you.
We do have to have a flagger out there during this project on a very underutilized rail line. That's how difficult these things get sometimes. So
I won't hold up the briefing. I'll ask offline. Thank you.
Great question, because I wish I knew, but I'm not exactly sure where that comes from. So, all right. Item 9 is also Kyle's. If there are no other questions, it's an amendment to the fiscal year 23 budget with some North Carolina grant funds.
So this item was, the board back in December approved an incentive for Nelapac to locate their medical packaging products manufacturing facility here. In that item, we also applied, the board authorized us to apply for state grant funds. We were awarded state grant funds, and so this item accepts those and puts those in the budget so that we can administer that.
All right, we're good. We're good. Thank you, Kyle.
Very good. Thank you. So items 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15 are all Aisha Carter's contracts she's been busily working on for ARPA funding. So I'll turn it over to Aisha. Do you want me to introduce them one by one, or do you just want to go through them?
You can go ahead and introduce them.
Okay. All right. Item 10 is a resolution approving execution of contract with Smart Start of Forsyth County to support Pre-K Priority Coalition in Forsyth County with ARPA funds. You got an associated budget ordinance amendment.
So Smart Start of Forsyth County was awarded ARPA funding at $3.7 million to serve the pre-K priority, a coalition of organizations dedicated to increasing the quality and number of pre-K programs in Forsyth County. Any questions in regards to that?
I've got somewhat of a question. You and I have exchanged an email or two about the measurable objectives that were listed, and there were some corrections made, which I appreciated. It's missing one pretty important component, which is a true. In fact, they call it basically they've identified a formative assessment, and probably Commissioner Woodbury would know it's called a TS Gold measurement tool, which really measures things that the teacher writes down. If a child can do this, they kind of check it off. It's like a checking boxes that the teacher works with a pre-K student. But there are instruments at the end of the year that allow that basically the student is able to complete some some pictures and do some things themselves, which is a different kind of assessment. I know of one particularly, is Woodcock Johnson's a standard, but I suspect that there are other companies that are in that too. It has no summative evaluation. It has a formative piece that the teacher uses during the year, but it has nothing that's kind of a summative piece. And the good thing about the summative piece, it actually, if you use like the Woodcock Johnson, it ties into kindergarten It ties into first grade, ties into second grade, and you're actually able to monitor to see what kind of progress the student's making in those areas. And you don't monitor everybody, you monitor a sample. And that was kind of at the point during the development of the ARPA grant, the research side of that did not quite get the attention that it needed. And I've had no trouble approving the amount going forward, but we're missing, I think, an important evaluation component that really ought to be done. And I would feel badly at the end that we don't have that kind of measurement available. I have communicated with Ms. McManus, superintendent, about that issue, because if it's important, the school district would have to follow that sample into kindergarten, first, second, and third grade. And I sense a pretty positive response on their part, because we are trying to be able to really prove that we've made a difference here. I mean, pre-K is something that's not a part of the state system, and we want to see that. The whole idea of the experiment was to learn that. So do you see any problem with we can approve it, but to return to that issue with an intent that gets corrected in some way? And it's kind of like the school district needs to look at their cost a little bit more carefully. The actual cost, I thought by now they'd have an actual cost of a summative assessment, but there isn't one. I think it's assumed they just wouldn't have it. And I just think that's really important after a year's worth of work on the thing.
Yeah, I will communicate your message to Smart Start and try to get that resolved before the agreement is actually signed.
It could even be a part of the agreement that one will be done. I mean, that they'll do it, and because I'm not wed to Woodcock Johnson, it's a pricey. It is not cheap.
Right.
But that's part of the issue of this, was to get good evaluation and to do it right. Yeah, we can do that. That'd be great. I mean, I can approve it if we figure out something for that.
Perfect. I'll let them know.
All right.
Could I ask? So basically, this is a pilot program with no future funding once the ARPA funds.
Correct. Which is all the more important to find out whether it worked or not. And the kids that go through, there'd be 2 years worth of students that can go through this with this grant. And it sure would be nice, even if it's not funded in any way. I mean, the state could pick it up for that matter, but the point is that the school district could follow those kids for through their time, the third grade, and then you know if what you did really made a difference.
Yeah, the funding is going to support 30 pre-K classrooms.
Yes, that's in the experiment piece, yes.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions on that? If not, item 11 is a resolution approving execution of agreement with ABC of North Carolina Child Development Center.
So ABC of NC Child Development Center was approved funding for $601,898 for a playground and an HVAC system to enhance outdoor spaces used in therapy for autistic individuals and improve the air quality of the indoor spaces on ABC of Child Development Center's campus. And this is in line with Forsyth County's Department of Public Health's mission to prevent disease and promote a healthy community. Any questions in regards to that? It's a capital project.
Item 12 is a resolution approving execution of agreement with Piedmont Triad Regional Council to conduct research to address the crisis in IDD housing and wraparound services.
So this resolution relates to a round one subrecipient. Piedmont Triad Regional Development Corporation was approved for funding on February 17th, 2022. This agenda item simply replaces Piedmont Triad Regional Development Corporation with Piedmont Triad Regional Council.
It got into some difficult insurance issues about who the insured entity was, and anyway, it just made more, the Regional Triad Development Corporation didn't have any staff, and so it wasn't really insured. They were all staff of Piedmont Triad Regional Council. It suffered for a while, so it made more sense just to reach back out to Matthew Dolge and said, can you just put it under the cog and it'll be easier? And so we finally got there, so sorry for the delay. Questions on that? All right. Item 13 is a resolution approving the execution agreement with Hospice and Palliative Care Center doing business as Trellis Supportive Care.
So Hospice doing business as Trellis Supportive Care was awarded $1 million for a one-time capital improvement to install an HVAC system and infection control measures in the Kate B. Reynolds Hospice Home which is a 40-bed inpatient facility in Winston-Salem. The improvements include replacing the 24-year-old HVAC system and providing each room with its own temperature control. Any questions on that? It's a capital project.
All righty. And item 14 is a resolution approving execution of agreement with Children's Home Society of North Carolina to open a Child First program.
So the Children's Home Society of North Carolina was awarded $568,450 to launch Child First as a new program for Forsyth County. Child First is an evidence-based home visiting program with proven effectiveness in achieving improved mental health outcomes for children under the age of 5 and their caregivers. This is a psychotherapeutic two-generation intervention which helps build a nurturing, responsive parent-child relationship. It will serve at least 70 families in 2023. Any questions in regards to that?
All right, and the last one is a resolution approving execution of agreement with Horizons Residential Care Center for homes for clients with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Aisha.
And Horizons was awarded a $1.9 million in ARPA funding to transition to a non-congregate living environment, beginning with a transfer of 12 licensed beds from their current facility to 2 freestanding residential units with 6 beds each on their Royal Hall campus. The 6-bed homes will house 12 clients living with profound intellectual and developmental disabilities. The residential units will be located on Forsyth County-owned property. Any questions in regards to that?
And just for the new commissioners, maybe, the Horizons Residential Care Facility at Horizons Park is actually on county property there, and they have a really long-term lease. They had a 100-year lease that we're probably 45 years into, and so they will actually be constructed that on county property, and obviously there's enough years left. The economic value of the property they're going to build it will be over by the time the lease is over. But anyway, and I think they intend to build it on property they currently have, and so they won't be coming back to you unless something changes, they won't be coming back to lease some additional property or add property into that big capital lease.
They do some pretty amazing work there. It's quite a facility, and I visited there twice, and if you ever have time to go visit them and sort of take a tour, what they're doing now and what they do.
If you want to improve your gratitude quotient, you go out there. And
that's a perfect way to say that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right.
Thank you.
All right, Aisha, thank you. Nice work today, and sorry we kept you this morning a little bit. Have a couple of three contractual matters. Item 16 is a resolution awarding and authorizing execution of a contract for the purchase of equipment to upfit Ford Interceptors, and that's going to be Stephen Brenniger, our fleet manager, is going to come up and talk to that.
Thank you, Commissioners, for allowing us to come up here. As you know, we bought 20 Interceptors for the Sheriff's Office last April and May, I believe. I met with the Sheriff's Department to see what kind of needs they would need as far as lighting equipment, graphics, anything like that. They give me a list of equipment, including light bars, brush guards, light heads, and miscellaneous siren speakers, brackets, and let me see, I missed one thing. That's pretty much it as far as what they purchased or what they intended on purpose. The bid for those come in at $94,842.09. And it was 2 bidders. One was considered non-responsive, just so they didn't accept their bid. The city of purchasing. Any questions?
All right, thanks, Steve.
Thank you, guys.
Appreciate that. Yep. Item 17, Minor is going to review its resolution authorizing procurement of air pollution monitoring equipment, and he's asking to do that under an exception to the bidding laws. So I'll turn it over to Minor.
Thank you. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here. For those of you that might not know me, my name is Minor. I work in the Office of Environmental Assistance and Protection. I'm here to seek your consideration of what I consider to be a very exciting opportunity. And the United States Environmental Protection Agency received a substantial amount of funding through the American Rescue Plan. And they committed over $50 million of that funding to be used to invest in improvements in air quality monitoring across the nation. We have been awarded over $85,000 of federal funding with no local matching requirement. And we were pre-approved to use this funding to improve our ability to monitor particulate matter in the local outdoor ambient air. So the item before you today is for 2 new continuous particulate matter monitors. They are similar in type or identical in type to a couple of monitors that we already have operating in our network. We don't have any backups, and for many years, the EPA has wanted to see us get some backup equipment so that we can assure continuous monitoring capability and minimize any downtime or periods of time where we don't have the data that we need to do the work that we do. And this is an opportunity for us to let them pay for this equipment and buy it for us with no local matching requirement. So this equipment is only available through one company, and that is Teledyne API. And we were pleased that the more recent price quote we got from them was a little bit lower than the one that we got earlier last year. So that's a good thing. We're getting a better deal than we expected on this. And we are ready to move forward with this with your approval.
Any questions? Minor.
Minor, that's like Christmas for you, isn't it?
Absolutely.
You know, I don't know if my son-in-law would want me to say this in public because, you know, talking about personalities. But he knows you. And he says, has Minor appeared before you all recently? I said, not that I know of. He says, give him whatever he wants. He's as good as you can get, and he's the best in the state. So far as I'm concerned, it's a no-brainer.
Thank you.
I certainly support the request. Do you have the 4 sites lined up in terms of the 2 that are existing plus the 2 you're going to add?
So we have 4 monitoring stations. 2 of them are in the same geographic location, 2 different buildings side by side with different types of equipment. And so, you know, we had an experience in the fall of 2021 when one of these continuous particulate matter monitors went down. And while my staff are really skilled at doing our own repairs and maintenance work in-house, you know, they can open up a piece of electronic equipment and replace components on circuit boards and do really technical repairs. But in this particular case, in the fall of 2021, the repair required shipping the unit back to the manufacturer. And during the supply chain disruptions, it took over 2 months for the manufacturer to do the repairs and get the equipment back to us. So during that time, since we didn't have a backup, we had to facilitate some really time-intensive workarounds to maintain the work that we were doing without that critical piece of equipment. And we did it, but it took a lot of extra staff time and effort. So we're not going to add these new pieces to any new locations. We're going to use them to make sure that we have a backup for each unit so that when it needs to, the ones that are running need to come offline for maintenance or repairs, that we can quickly deploy a backup one so we have continuous monitoring capability.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Minor. Appreciate that. All right, agenda item 18 is a resolution authorizing execution of Microsoft subscription and software services. Gary Koontz is going to review this.
Sorry, I didn't get up fast enough. Good afternoon. This is actually is a renewal of an enterprise agreement. We've maintained Microsoft Enterprise Agreement for software and subscription services for a very long time. It's a 3-year agreement, and this is the end of the 3rd year, so we're getting ready to renew this one again. I will say from our previous renewal, which was in 2020, these numbers is a 14.2% increase over what we paid in 2020. So in today's economy and marketplace, I think that was pretty good. It's right a little bit less than 5% a year. So this is a renewal of an agreement. Glad to answer any questions.
The state contract?
It is state contract, yes.
I mean,
it's the only way to buy it.
Mechanism, yeah.
Any questions for Gary?
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Gary. All right. And last but not least, to close us out, the illustrious Kirby Robinson to go over 2 property matters. Kirby, I'll just turn them both over to you.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and Board. I appreciate the opportunity to bring these to you today. All right, I got it there. So you may recall the board authorized some money to renovate the Highland Avenue Center. So there are a couple of tenants that are already in the Highland Avenue Center. And in order to start that renovation work, which will begin in the Daymark suite, we need to move some folks out of that suite. So Daymark worked with Partners, who's also in the Highland Avenue Center, and Partners agreed to sublease their space to Daymark, which will come back to you for approval in a separate action. But in order to do that, we have to relocate 22 workstations from Partners elsewhere. So staff worked with Partners. We evaluated their needs. It really makes sense to keep Daymark at the Highland Avenue Center and not relocate them, simply because I think they're seeing clients there. But the Partners folks are more hoteling spaces. It's people coming in. They're really just doing office or casework. So we identified 1,200 square feet that's available at the DSS facility. And then you can see that aerial sort of floor plan to your right. The orange spaces are the leased spaces. So there'll be roughly 22 workstations spread across those spaces. And there's a non-exclusive use of the conference room, which is in blue there. Under the terms of the proposed agreement, Partners will occupy that space through October 31st, 2024, or 60 days after a certificate of occupancy has been issued for the Highland Avenue Center, if that happens before that date. In other words, they won't be camping out there longer than they have to. And should that CO not happen prior to 10/31/24, a 6-month extension is available. The proposed base rental for the DSS space is $5.60 a square foot. That'll increase 3% in year 2 of the agreement. The lease setup is a full-service gross lease. The landlord provides all the services to the tenant, which actually is a nice perk for them because they provide their own janitorial service at Highland Avenue Center, so we're happy to do that for them. The rate and the structure of the lease outside of that janitorial component mirrors what they have at the Highland Avenue Center. So they're not paying anything different. It reimburses the county for the operating costs of the facility. It's actually a little bit of a decrease for them because they occupy roughly 4,000 square feet at the Highland Avenue Center right now. Happy to answer any questions the board has.
Yeah, I'll just add one comment. The nature of the relationship between us and Partners really predated CenterPoint, and so there's not a market-based lease component of this. It's always been, CenterPoint Partner. They are us, and therefore we just pass along those costs.
Yes, sir.
So what was in those spaces that we're leasing to them?
I apologize. I should have mentioned that. They're actually open and vacant right now. I don't know if that means that staff is teleworking or if they're not filled positions. We have worked with DSS, though, to identify those. They're comfortable with the fact that we won't need them or they can move staff around during the term of the lease. And so they're actually not, even though it looks like defined work areas, there are really only 3 offices in that. The other spaces are sort of open areas where we're going to be working some folks in. If, for instance, 4110B, I can use my cursor here, I apologize. This could be a cubicle area. Right now, it's sort of an open area outside of 4113, which is an office. And so we've gotten the Partners maintenance folks in there, and they feel comfortable kind of working some workstations in there. 4130, for instance, is sort of an open walkway area that we can fit 7 workstations without making our fire code folks upset. And so we're going to try and really pack some folks in here. They are capped in the agreement at the number of staff they can bring on site, so it won't affect other DSS work areas. They can't have more than 22 folks on site at any one time. But, there'll be 200 Partners employees that could potentially access the space. So we'll be working with a pretty robust scheduling system to make sure they stay within that parameter.
And they're leasing the space at Highland now for $85 a square foot?
Yes, sir. So when the board took over the Highland Avenue Center from, I guess it was, I don't know if you remember, CenterPoint or Cardinal when we finally did that.
It was CenterPoint.
Yes, sir. The leases that they had negotiated and then the board sort of assumed and we carried that forward were basically an operating rate. So we calculated, and I remember doing the math on this years ago, with the electricity, just the utilities, the maintenance, we don't maintain their trade fixtures or their specialty equipment. If it's part of the facility, we're going to maintain it. That rate encapsulates those costs, except for janitorial. So it's basically an OpEx reimbursement.
Got it. Thank you.
That's right. We lease for $9 the Monarch. It's kind of our market over in that area right now.
Great.
Okay. All right. In terms of acquisition of real property, this one's got a little bit of a story. I know it's been a long day, so I'll try to step through it pretty quickly, but I did want to just kind of touch on the journey here, if you will. So in 1984, the county authorized a declaration of restriction for, you always call it the Cyworks property, it's Callidium North now, off of Haynes Mill. Basically what that did is it restricted the 30 acres there for use of public outdoor recreation only. And now we refer to that as the Land Water Conservation Fund easement, LWCF. The purpose of that is to protect land, protect natural resources, wildlife habitats, conserve land, et cetera. In exchange for that restriction at the time, the Nature Science Center got some money, and they used that money to improve the property or what have you back in 1984. And so that restriction is on that property in perpetuity. I think the board's thought process, as I understand it, is that the long-term desire, once Callidium moves out of that property, is to recognize its highest and best use, which is probably industrial property. In order to do that, we have to remove that entire restriction from the property. So the restriction requires that in order to do that, you have to replace the property that you're converting with other property that is at least equal fair market value, and that it will be developed for public outdoor recreation. It is a high bar, and so the land value at Callidium right now is $3.4 million. So at some point, and we're working on this, now really, we're looking for $3.4 million land that we can convert this restriction to in the county. And in other words, to do that and to recognize the property's highest and best use, we've got to remove that use restriction. In the short term, the DOT is planning a road widening project for Haynes Mill Road. You've probably seen that's underway now, just further down. And they've determined a small portion of county property is needed for that project. And so if you can picture the stoplight there at the intersection, that would basically become a traffic circle. And you can see that this is their plan on the right side of the screen. The green area would be right-of-way property. It is a very small sliver of the county property. It really is road frontage and would become right-of-way. 3/4 of an acre. It's long. It's stretched out. There is absolutely zero public outdoor recreation use happening on that property now, outside of doing some grass mowing. And anyway, but that's okay. The whole property is restricted, and we want to make sure we're mindful of those requirements. So in order to sell that property to the DOT, we've got to remove that restriction. It's really fascinating to me that the DOT actually couldn't condemn the property. The restriction is so strong that even the DOT couldn't condemn it. I was fascinated by that, and so were they. They offered $112,000 for the property. It was based on an appraisal. So that really set us in motion of finding a replacement property. And you'll recall, I believe last November, the board authorized a contract to purchase 7212 Doral Drive. That's shown in blue on your screen. Ivy Lanes offered to sell that to the county. It would be located next to what would be the future agricultural park complex. Her asking price is $210,000. That does appear to be fair and reasonable. It's 5.4 acres, again, located off of Doral. It would essentially double the county's road frontage on Doral and really allow for easier access to the property when you're turning in big trailers and stuff down the road. It really does appear to be a viable replacement property. In fact, the National Park Service has all but said, yes, that will work, which is really nice, and we appreciate that. So in order to move that property and convert it from Haynes Mill Road to Doral Drive, we've got to show them that it has at least equal fair market value and that we would develop it for public outdoor recreation. Our Parks and Rec folks have looked at it. They've shown that we can do some educational gardens on it, a little parking area. It's a pretty neat little site plan. And then if they agree to that, the board could authorize us to sell the DOT the right-of-way property, use the proceeds from that sale towards a portion of this asking price. So that was part of what the board authorized last November. The change is an extended due diligence period. So the due diligence period that was attached to the initial contract was 30 days, and there was a $0 deposit. From a seller standpoint, it's hard to understand the bureaucracy that's involved in a conservation easement, and I sort of understand that. So they felt like maybe we weren't interested in the property because we were actually holding the contract because we knew if we entered a 30-day due diligence period, we couldn't close. And so we talked to her, and she feels like if the county were to offer, the board were to offer, $10,000 for a non-refundable deposit. She would then grant a 90-day due diligence period with an additional 90 days that could be granted in 30-day increments for additional $10,000 per 30 days. All of those deposits would, of course, be applied to the purchase price at closing. I highly doubt we would go beyond 90 days. I think that the deposit shows the seller that the county's serious. Again, I think we've tried to explain some of the inner workings of this thing. There's a lot of moving pieces to it. We're getting very close to having our finalized conversion application with the National Park Service. It's not so much that we've been moving slow or they've been moving slow, but there are market factors there where it's really hard to get a yellow book appraiser out to a property right now. Well, that took 2 months. And so it's just elongated the timeline. When we negotiated with the seller to bring you this contract, we really thought we might be closed by Christmas. That didn't turn out to be true. But we feel like if we can go under contract, at the end of next week, we'll definitely, I wouldn't say definitely, but we really hope to be able to close within that 90-day period. And that $10,000 would be applied to the $210,000 at closing.
Just to make sure that I didn't miss anything, could you repeat what you just said?
I'm sorry. My mouth went dry. I talked so long. I apologize.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Probably got more than one, but the main one is this transfer, this, was it a state or federal conservation that we got? I can't remember.
It actually involves all 3 levels of government.
Well, does this conversion that's under discussion, has been for a while, is it only going to apply to the 7212 that
yes, sir.
dwelling in small parcel of land?
That's right. Yes, sir. So
that has nothing to do with the other.
It will take away essentially whatever it appraises for from that conversion. It'll take away 3/4 of an acre and that value from the Haynes Mill Road property. So theoretically, when we go to do that larger conversion, when we can find a replacement site, that amount in land will not be in that token.
But it don't affect any of the other land that we have.
It does not, no, sir. It's this is really just a short-term issue.
Well, does this finally get it all of that conversion moved from where it originally was up here?
In other words, to the whole park. If
All
I'm
of it
understanding
was-
Commissioner Linville, to the whole park and do the whole thing.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So,
I think the answer is no.
well, the answer in this context is no. Now, one thing that I actually thought of, and we'd have to, I say we've gotten a lot better with understanding this conservation easement during this process. There's been real value add. This particular action would not lead to that. It doesn't mean that down the road we couldn't explore that, because if there's LWs, and I may be talking out of turn here, they're much more likely to authorize conversions if property with an LWCF restriction already exists. They like to see them next to each other.
So it's still some of this money, that grant that we got, that is applying to what land is left there. Because the first that we moved one part of it, it seemed like 2-3 times. I can't remember exactly. The first time was where the lake was down there, and they built a hotel on it, and that had to be worked out somehow, because a developer wanted this land that the county owned, and they used to say that you could not fill up a lake or an impoundment. Somebody did. I don't know whether that's still in place or not, but it's developed, and then that portion of the conversion, it was just on about 3 or 4, maybe 5 acres, and it went to Yadkin River out there. Is that part still there? It seemed like we moved that, or either at least, yeah, we did move it from there, I believe. We moved it over to Balsam Road for some reason. Don't remember exactly what it was, but I just want to be sure that this, you must have, the last time you went over this, you must have talked real fast, because I believe I missed it.
Yes, sir. So I may have actually made a...
Or maybe that's that day that I was sick. and wasn't here. But at any rate, I just want to be sure that it does not affect the bigger portion of land.
It does, and one point I should really make, and I'm sorry, I should have been better with this. The LWCF, when they move a restriction, wants you to acquire property for the purpose of moving that restriction. They don't want you to have something that you say, oh, I'll just move this restriction over there. I'm not saying that that makes total sense to me, but that is the way they think about it. They want it to be about not, so in other words, we already own the Rolling Hill site. I'm not sure they would be accepting and moving the restriction there. I hope that helps.
Mr. Attorney, you make sure that.
Well, I just wanted to say that this is in no small part thanks to you, because you did bring that up at an earlier meeting, and it does not restrict the entire, if you look at what's on the screen, it's only going to restrict the blue, that little sliver that we're purchasing. It's not going to restrict the pink property, the larger park property.
Well, just be sure you got it locked down in writing. And maybe write it down twice, if that helps any.
And that will come back to you, Commissioner, for the actual sale and the conversion, I think in a separate action.
See it again. Yeah, I think the opportunity to be thinking about in the future is as Calliope moves downtown, and as the highest and best use of Calliope North, as we look at that, because the value is so high, there is a substantial park project somewhere in Forsyth County's future to the tune of $3.4 million or whatever it is at the time. And so it's something to think about.
I'm sure we've already closed on the Blues Creek stuff. That's all done.
Yeah, but we only paid $600,000 for that too. I mean,
but it could have been. Can you pair your part? In other words, can you have several pieces that you purchased that would all add up to a single, to the total amount? In other words, 600 here and 800 here, 400 here, and you get to the value of the 3.4 million in multiple parcels.
You are also committing to developing them. I think as part of you can't land bank it. Is part of the challenge.
I think most of the problem Kirby's been dealing with is these folks are extremely slow to respond, and they want you to have a multi-year planning process. And with Ballew's Lake, we just didn't have the time to wait around, and that's why Kirby's coming before you today, is because he's still trying to get this nailed down with all of the different layers of government to approve this conversion. So Ballew's Lake would have been great, but we just didn't have the time.
Maybe yeah, right.
Wow, because I think we're going to face the issue of Calliope North not being, I think we're going to be facing that issue way sooner than later.
I remember Mike Anderson saying too, it's hard to have competing restrictions on one property. That's another thing with the Blues.
And the federal government ultimately doesn't want to do this. They just, they put the thing in place so you wouldn't do it, but there is an avenue to work through it.
It's one of the most complex projects you've worked on, isn't it?
Out of millions of dollars of county real estate, this may be the most complex.
That's what the federal government.
Yeah, for $112,000 to swap off.
210,000.
Yeah, but it also gets, it does get
I'm thinking
really,
112 you're getting for the right of way.
Yeah. But it gets a road improvement on Haynes Mill Road. I travel that road right much, and that improvement needs to be made. So
Conceptually, Piedmont Greenway as an example use that would qualify if we had a plan to develop it and were able to identify property for the right of way.
The two qualifiers are fair market value and public outdoor recreation. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate the good work. I think this is going to work.
Yes, sir. I think
and I understand the owner's desire to,
thank you, sir.
To have some non-refundable deposit that'll be applied to the sale. Got it.
All right, Mr. Chairman, that's all we have.
Good. All right. Anything else for the good of the order here we adjourn?
Mr. Chairman, as my friend Ted Kaplan, former state legislator, former county commissioner, used to say, I'd like to quote him. Mr. Chairman, I move we adjourn.
Second.
I got a second from Commissioner Neville. Stand adjourned.